A demonic spot beneath blue skies. Chapter 3, first part. No, you can't do this. Meg cried frantically. Her body trembled fiercely, and her eyes were hot and wet. She couldn't let herself cry, though. This is just a fish. There's no saying it's necessarily the same as a noble. If by some chance it just happens to be a regular fish, you'll be a murderer, with your own kind chasing you down for the rest of your days. That still sounds better than hanging around with someone who might be a noble. Lower your gun. No way. Lower yours first. Please. Let's talk this out. You think you can get a shot off quicker than me? Cowboy asked, seeming to mock the girl with the question. Your slug wouldn't reach me till I'd killed you both 3 times over. You're probably right. Yet you're still willing to do this. I don't care how dangerous it is, Meg said. I can't let you shoot someone on a 50-50 chance. And I won't let you become a murderer. The killing lust that colored Cowboy from head to toe wavered suddenly. You have guts, he said, casually turning his rifle toward the ground. Swear you won't use it again, Meg said to him, the handgun still trained on the bounty hunter. Yeah, so long as he's still himself. But if I see the slightest hint of him turning into a noble, I'll shoot him dead without a word. Fair enough, Wesley said with a nod. Meg looked stricken, but the young man gave her a nod too. If I start acting funny, plug away. That's an official request. Sure thing, Cowboy replied. Meg lowered the pistol. Gently taking the weapon from the girl, Wesley said, It's okay, Meg. I'm gonna get rid of this bugger now. And saying that, he turned the barrel of his gun toward the parasite on his shoulder. Once he was sure no one else was in the line of fire, he pulled the trigger. There was a dull thud against the lawman's temple, and he was knocked unconscious. What the hell are you doing? Meg cried, the corners of her eyes rising angrily. Pointing to the gunstock he'd hit Wesley with, Cowboy told her, It's got a rubber pad on it. All he got was a slight concussion out of that. But just try firing off a shot now. Weird stuff would be all over us in a second. Meg had to admit he was right. This place was home to nobles and their servants. Humans were no more than prey for them. We'll set out once he comes to. Take a minute to cool down, why don't you? And saying that, Cowboy tossed Meg something he'd had tucked in the back of his gun belt. It was a little spray can. That's a cooling mist. Works as a painkiller too. I've used all kinds, but this stuff's the best. You're not all bad, are you? Cowboy looked all around them, and once Meg had finished applying the spray, he said to the groaning Wesley, Okay, on your feet, deputy. Your dad left you some mighty big boots to fill. Letting out a sharp breath, Cowboy fell to his knees. On the other hand, Wesley stood up. The lawman lightly nudged the tuft of the same foot he'd driven into the man's solar plexus. He'll be able to walk soon enough. Let's hurry up through the forest, the lawman said, clapping Meg on the shoulder. Seems pretty dependable, Meg thought, and she felt her chest growing warm. It was the same comforting sensation she'd felt so long ago getting a hug from her father when he came back from fishing. In about 10 minutes' time, they were through the forest. There were signs of things rustling about in the distance, but nothing came after the trio. On exiting the forest, Meg scanned the surroundings apprehensively and said, "The others probably took a different route, but I wonder if they made it through okay." She was referring to the rest of the bounty hunters. "Forget about those bastards," Wesley spat. "More importantly, I'm gonna shoot this fish. You got a problem with that?" "Do what you like," Cowboy replied, sounding somewhat amused. He didn't seem to hold a grudge over the kick in the gut the lawman had given him. Actually, he seemed quite curious to see whether the nobles' fish could be destroyed. Still, the bounty hunter continued. "A big bang could cause trouble for us. Wrap some cloth around your gun. Hey, you'd better be quick about this. You're looking mighty sickly." Meg handed the lawman a towel she had tucked through her belt. Wesley wrapped the whole gun in it, doubling up on the fabric around the cylinder. His weapon was a revolver, with a cylinder that turned every time a bullet was fired. But that meant there had to be a gap between the cylinder and the frame. If there wasn't, the cylinder couldn't turn. When the weapon was discharged, the sound of the gunshot could also escape through that gap. Just wrapping the barrel wouldn't be enough to muffle the sound. "Here we go," Wesley said, taking aim and pulling the trigger. There was a muffled report, and the fish's body was blown clean off. "What the?" Wesley shouted. "Persistent little sucker," Meg groaned. The head of the fish still had its teeth deep in Wesley's shoulder. A thread-like stream of blood dribbled from the creature's pulverized portion to seep into the ground. "Nothing left but its head. And it's still feeding on him," the girl exclaimed. Saying nothing, Wesley cocked the hammer for a second shot. Since his target was even smaller now, he took careful aim, and the second bullet hit the fish's head, blasting it to bits. "That time did it," Meg exclaimed, pumping her fist in spite of herself. "Nope, not yet," Cowboy countered with a shake of his head. "What?" "See for yourself." Even Wesley himself looked where the bounty hunter was pointing. There was no fish there anymore. However, a pair of white teeth remained. And to all appearances those teeth made sounds that suggested pleasure as they continued their weird work, sinking even deeper into the flesh of Wesley's gore-stained shoulder and wringing out more of his lifeblood. Wesley grabbed the teeth by the roots and pulled, but they didn't budge, and he soon relented. They're curved like hooks, and sunk in there real good. No chance of getting them out without an operation. Luckily, the bleeding's not so bad. We'll keep going like this. With things like that flying around, I'm surprised all of us were okay. All of us." Wesley gave Meg a glare, and then made her hastily button her lip. "Okay. Now the question is where to go next. Got any good ideas, Sheriff?" "Knock it off from a deputy," Wesley said, tying the towel around his shoulder. But Cowboy replied, "No, you're not." "Huh. Huh?" "You stopped being a deputy the moment the sheriff died. Naturally, you've got to take on the sheriff's responsibilities. Rise to the occasion, okay? From here on out, we're going to treat you like a sheriff. Isn't that right, mister?" "It's Meg." Meg, Cowboy said. I agree. That's what I'm gonna do. You hang in there, Wesley, she said, clinging to his arm with a look of sincerity on her face, causing the young lawman's expression to stiffen. It took Wesley a whole second to work up a smile. In his present state, that undoubtedly seemed like an eternity. He lightly slapped his own cheeks a few times in succession, and then he took a deep breath and exhaled. As he gazed at the other two, he looked a little tougher than before. Then, as sheriff, let me give you an order. From here on out, you're to do whatever I tell you. I won't stand for any back talk. We clear on that? Yes, sir, Meg replied, raising her right hand and elbowing Cowboy. He said nothing, but raised his right hand too. Good enough? Let's go, then. Wesley turned his back to the two of them. A mountain loomed before them. In its side there yawned a black maw 5 yards wide. It was a stony tunnel. From the skill with which the rock had been cut and fit together, it was clear it hadn't been the work of human hands. And this was undoubtedly a noble project. A road, also paved in cut stone, connected to the path the trio had taken through the forest, as well as running up either side of the mountain. I don't get it, Meg said, cocking her head to one side as her rubber boots became accustomed to the road. Don't get what? Wesley inquired. Why the nobility do the things they do. They could fly the skies with ease, yet the harbor was filled with boats for crossing the very seas that give them so much trouble. There are even vessels that go underwater. And then there's this road in the tunnel. Even after putting a perfectly good road plumb through the middle of the mountain, they still threw in those alternate routes. It's a phenomenon called noble wastefulness, said Cowboy. I think I've heard of that. What is it? It seems they have this tech called tele-something or other. That could break a person down to itty-bitty pieces and send them to the moon in a split second. Still, they say about 5,000 years ago, the nobility constructed a pathway from this one spot, on Earth, up to the moon. Cowboy closed his mouth. This was due to the fact that Meg and Wesley had both let theirs drop open. He waited a little while, but as their mouths remained open, he continued in a rough tone. It ain't around now, though. See, the aliens wrecked it during the OSB wars. Still, it's called a perfect example of the whole noble wakefulness. Still, it's called a perfect example of the whole noble wastefulness phenomenon. That certainly is a waste. Meg acknowledged with a nod. When she glanced up at him again, with a look of sudden discovery, she said, Now that you mention it, this old poet who came to our village a long time ago said something. According to him, the nobility lived for their destruction. Or is that not the same thing? It's just, that's what came to me right now. It's just, that's what came to me right now. Well, if it were just a matter of squandering resources, they'd have noticed at some point and put a stop to it. This was intentional wastefulness, which would probably lead to their destruction. They loved their roads and carriages, even though they could fly through the skies. And I don't think that was just due to their tendency for nostalgia. Somewhere deep down, the nobility probably had some dark impulse they didn't even know about. Meg nodded. A strange sense of solidarity enveloped the two of them. At any rate, let's get moving. No dawdling, you two. Wesley shouted somewhat irritably, having already started walking toward the tunnel. Perhaps he could sense something. First part, end.